So in the previous video, we've exposed a REST API as a GraphQL API. This was the product page API that was running in the Kubernetes cluster with the different services for the product page, reviews, ratings, and so on. Here we are going to expose a new API, but that's going to be an external service. So again, we create this API doc to provide the GraphQL schema. But this time, you see, we're going to define an external service for this openlibrary.org. And that shows you that we can expose through the gateway as a GraphQL API, an external REST endpoint that could be an API provided by a virtual machine or something like a public API. It doesn't really matter. And again, we create the resolver map where we define that to resolve this schema we acquired before, we need to send this request on to openlibrary.org on this path. We need to be providing some additional query patterns and doing a transformation again with JQ. So I can go ahead and create my schema that will combine this API doc and the resolver map. And after that, I can create my route table to expose this particular API. Now, if you see this option, that's also quite interesting for testing log-sensitive info. You can then go into the logs of the gateway and see a lot of debug information showing you what other REST calls that are sent to the back end and so on. So if there's something wrong, you can troubleshoot pretty easily what's going on. We have exposed this API, and now I can send this query. I want the product title, and I want the different languages that are available for this book, which is the same book that is written by the Bookinfo API. So you can see in a nice format, I get all the different languages, and what we're going to do now is that we're going to be stitching these elements together. It's a little bit like how we stitched these two APIs when we did the video on the developer portal, if you happened to watch that video. What we're going to do is we're going to stitch together these APIs again. We are going to do this declaratively, which is basically a game changer. I have these two APIs that I have defined inside of this platform. I could even stitch together an API provided by a third-party GraphQL server like Apollo, stitched together with an API that I have created that way. But here I'm going to stitch together two different APIs that I've created. The one for the product page and the one for this open library. Then you'll notice I just need to create this GraphQL stitch schema again declaratively. I want to stitch together these two APIs and I want to stitch them on this title. So they have the same title for this book, and I want to stitch things together, so I update my route table. Now, you see I'm using this new particular prefix called GraphQL stitch, and I'm not providing a GraphQL schema, but instead I am providing a GraphQL stitch schema. So I can set this here, and now I can use this new endpoint, and I can basically ask again for this products for home. So the same that I did before, but in that case, I'm going to add this language, right? So if you remember here, I was able to provide this query in the Explorer. Now I have to stitch a new API, and I have this products for home, as you see here. I have this new option language, which is present, so I can run that, and I didn't put the right endpoint here, so this is not going to work. If I remember this correctly, this is something that has to be updated to have stitched. So we'll need something that has GraphQL-stitched with the correct endpoint URL. If you look at the endpoint URL, you'll notice that it says localhost. So we'll need to update that and change that. So let's go back over here. And what we'll do is we'll copy this URL over here, and that input looks a lot better as an endpoint URL. So this is looking a lot better. It reads better. Now I can go ahead and rerun this, and I can combine these together so that the first API I was having, I didn't have this language option. I said, okay, these language options is provided by, or these language options are provided by another GraphQL API. If I stitch them together, which I can now in one API, I can give both information about this book and the languages that this book is available in. So again, I could just use a curl here, but I wanted to show you again that you could do this all through the UI.